For someone who's listening or watching this, what would you want them to take away from your message?
I would want them to realize that whatever the change that you're dealing with or contemplating, find small ways to approach it. Give yourself a reality check. Mm-hmm. What really is the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
What can you, and how likely is it that will happen? And how could you prevent that from happening? Because I think we build up our own roadblocks to our own happiness, which mm-hmm. is so, sad, right? That we're the people that are holding us back. So
it's true though.
Yeah. So just do some thoughtful reflection about what needs to happen, what's holding you back, so you can break down those things one by one.
Welcome to another episode of Everyday Badassery. I'm your host, Christine Lozada, and this is a podcast meant to inspire you to be just 1% more badass today than you were yesterday. And I got something for you to help encourage you on your journey and bring out your badassery. I have a free journal for you to do along with these podcast episodes, so check the show notes below. But today, I'm actually not traveling. I'm excited because I have a visitor in town. Gaby, somebody who I used to work with in the corporate world. I kind of think of her as someone who has the biggest brains that I've ever met. But one of the things I love is people who are making huge jumps in life to change from something that may have been great and secure to into the unknown and doing something wildly different. So Gaby is in the process of her jump right now, and she's got a lot of inspiration to give you all, so let's bring her in.
I'm g.g.mckay. You can call me Gaby. I'm a writer. I write fiction and nonfiction. Right now I'm working on a fiction novel questioning religion and the way that the universe works in a mm-hmm. sort of fantasy philosophical fiction novel. And I also write humorous nonfiction memoir stories a la David Sedaris. That's the closest reference point. I do a lot of personality tests or self-assessments, and I'm very curious about who I am. It's very egotistical, I know. But I have a whole folder about all about me, my Myers-Briggs, my Berkman, all these.
Of course you do.
All these things. And I finally feel like I'm becoming the person that I've always wanted to be. If I go back through the archives, it's that
is so powerful.
Yeah, I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid.
I love jumps. And one of the things I think holds people back a lot is their fears, mm-hmm. which we're talking about. But it's really within that, it's a change and a departure from what they're currently doing. Mm-hmm. And it's not the fear of failure. It's not the fear of running out of money. It's not the fear of whatever it is. It's a resistance to change and a fear of not knowing what that's going to feel like when mm-hmm. they've made that change.
Yeah.
Why are you so adaptive to change?
Well, I think partially it's because I lived on 5 different continents before I was 15.
Okay.
So
that's a little bit of change.
Yeah. So I'm used to kind of being thrown into a new environment, having to adapt. I'm a very good chameleon when I need to be. So I can see what's going on. I observe what others are doing and kind of figure out. And I think that's why I'm comfortable traveling, because there's a model for the behavior wherever you are all around you. But yeah, so I think that helps a lot. And I think too, not to get too psychological, but a secure attachment style. You know, I had a really great upbringing where when you have a safe environment when you're growing up, it gives you the equipment to explore further in your world, because there's a safe harbor waiting for you at home. Mm. So I think that's another privilege that I have, is having great parents and a loving family that allows me to kind of do more of this exploration.
I love that. So if somebody has not lived on 5 different continents or maybe doesn't have that kind of support network, how might somebody adapt that mindset mm-hmm. without having that kind of a background? For me, mm-hmm. I was very resistant to change, mm-hmm. or oh my gosh, this is a new environment. It was traveling that got me there, mm-hmm. and specifically solo traveling, which is why I'm all about encouraging people to travel alone.
Right.
Because when you put yourself in those moments, and it doesn't need to be far. Most people are like, I can't take a solo trip abroad for months at a time. No, just take yourself out on a date in your own backyard. You don't have to go far to travel.
Right.
And be in that mindset of exploring. But I always encourage people to do that because so often people are uncomfortable being alone, and not enough. And doing that regularly helps you to be more adaptive to change in other really big life jumps.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation of something else someone can do to help them get into that kind of a mindset that allows them to make jumps?
Yeah, I think with any change, there's two forces at work. So imagine you have to like push a heavy boulder, right? So you can either increase the force with which you push it, or you can make the surface that it's kind of going along smoother, right? So you can either increase the force, so you can say, I want this, and I really, really want this. And when your desire grows so much, any kind of friction is kind of not that big a deal. Or you can work on the friction part. So what's hard about the thing that you're trying to do, and how can you make that less hard? So your example is saying, okay, well, I want to travel, but look, man, like going abroad, that seems like a really big deal. So let's start domestically. And then you start, that you're starting to rub away at that like gravelly surface to make a smooth, a smooth runway for you to make the changes in your life that you want to make.
I like it. So the point of that is to get a big boulder, use brute force, and do it on a very difficult road.
Yeah. I feel like, so for example, I feel like you are the brute force kind of change person, because you're like, you know what, I don't care how hard it is, I want this, and my pure force of will is going to make this happen. If you're not like that, I'm not necessarily like that. I'm like, whatever, I like other things, like I can change my goals. Then you just start small too, like,
smaller boulders, which actually is no different than what I've done. So yes, I agree, that is my mindset, because for me it's like, okay, this boulder might be heavy or hard or difficult to move, but why not just try, and why not just do it anyway?
Yeah.
And that is generally my mindset for difficult places to travel or difficult changes or choices I've made in life. Because if I push really hard on that boulder and nothing happens, then it's just still in the same spot, and I tried, and I might be a little bit tired afterwards, but that's all right.
Well, I think too, another way of getting rid of the obstacles in your way is to really examine them and question them and ask, is this even really an obstacle for me, right?
Yeah.
So, we're going back to like, okay, the first thing that might come to mind is like, oh man, you're quitting your job. You're not going to have security or stability. That's really scary. And you start to trump up this fear. But then when you look at it rationally, it's like, okay, how much money do I need to be comfortable?
Yeah.
For how long? How easy would it be to make money if I needed to?
Yeah.
Like, do I have any skills that I can employ,
Yeah.
And, sometimes that's true, right? Like, if we were doing this in 2009, when the economy was, like, super contracted, like, maybe I wouldn't have made the same choice, right? But, you have to actually look at your situation with clarity and not just assumptions. I think a lot of people make kind of broad assumptions that, you always have to have your next job lined up when you leave a job. That's good advice most of the time. But not all the time. Right, exactly. So I think if you're trying to make a change in your life, but you're just not doing it, start to like maybe even journal, like, why not? Like, what is stopping me? And then list those things out, and then really take a logical mind to those statements and see if there's any truth to it, or if there is truth, how you can mitigate that as well.
What you're talking about is how I got over my fear of sharks.
Oh.
In other words, going back to like people make assumptions.
Yeah.
My large assumption was sharks have teeth and sharks will eat you, which is kind of a valid assumption.
Those
right?
are both true things.
They are very scary looking things in the water, especially when you're in scuba gear and everything looks larger and objects may appear closer than and so when I started to, like what you're talking about, journal and chunk things down, it's like, well, why am I afraid of sharks? And I started realizing how many assumptions I had around like when they attack, why they attack, or not every shark is the same.
Yeah.
And if you actually go and look at shark statistics of attacks, and the numbers are tiny.
Yeah.
The number of people who have died from shark attacks is in the like single digits for the United States.
Yeah.
And where it's happening at is also very different than what I expected.
Yeah.
But once I started getting closer to my fear, in other words, understanding it, chunking it down, doing research on each thing I'm afraid of and had assumptions about.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say I'm no longer afraid.
Right.
But I swim with sharks all the time.
Right.
And I see them all the time. And now when I'm around them, yeah, I still get my, my heart in my chest, or my heart is in my chest.
This whole area.
This whole area constricts. I pee in my wetsuit. That happens, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't feel as afraid of them. That fear isn't completely gone away.
Yeah.
But in your instance, it softens your jump.
Yeah, I think whenever you examine your reality, your belief systems can change. When you find, like, for example, the sharks, I think it's called a saliency bias, where like getting chomped on by a shark, that's like a really powerful image.
Yeah.
But then you look up the statistics, and the likelihood of you getting eaten by a shark is like lower than driving a car or whatever.
And also a very powerful image that has been played time and time
Right.
again in movies and the media. Exactly.
All you need is 2 notes.
Yeah. In the same way that people who leave their jobs without something lined up, you have those stories of like, and then they became homeless and started doing drugs, and they lost everything.
They got depressed. And to be honest, like, I don't know anyone who like that happened to,
right?
Like, it's just this thing. It's like, oh, just generally. I mean, again, generally good advice. I'm not knocking it, but you just have to really weigh things with a clear mind.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of it is, we feel comfortable making choices about our lives that further kind of unite us to our community, right? So we like to make choices that the people that we love and that we're friends with, we like to make those same sorts of choices because it further brings us together.
Yeah.
And that social connection is such a strong driving human force that it's really hard to overcome. So, when people say like, oh, are you sure you're going to do that? And, I'm very lucky that I didn't have anyone saying that. They're like, yeah, go for it. Good job. But, I think even myself in my mind, I was like, oh man, all my friends aren't doing, except for Christine. This is actually, this is why I'm so grateful for our friendship, because you've given me kind of, an example of like, oh, people do this, Christine does this, other people I'm sure do this, but for most of the people in my life, they have jobs that they work and they love or not, but they take a certain path, and that might be right for them. But it's hard to make a different choice because it's kind of like me saying like, oh, that's not good enough for that. Like it feels like I'm being judgy of their life.
Because when I made my jump was, I'm going to go from having these cushy jobs at Walmart, Amazon, the corporate world, like great paying, great benefits, to being a travel creator, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I made that jump, kind of what you're talking about, I think a different way of saying it is like what's socially acceptable within your group of people.
Yeah.
And for me, every single person in my circle was the same thing in the corporate world, living in cities, very cushy lifestyles. And so it's not that they don't believe in me, and it's not that they're injecting their judgment against me. It's simply within what they have experienced in their own lives, the jump you're doing doesn't make sense to them. Right. And it's not them not believing in you, it's simply them saying like, is that the right choice?
Right.
Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
How are you going to make money? And it's not them doubting you, but it's how you receive that, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm going to link that video in the description below. I depicted that as me with a bear head on, spinning around in circles, being like, oh my gosh, like, oh, everyone is doubting me. When that's not the case. It's simply people looking out for you, but it can come across as people discouraging you, which I did have discouragers too, from making that jump.
And, there's examples of that in like other smaller but maybe even more kind of impactful decisions in life. So if you're friends with smokers and you decide to not smoke anymore, it's very hard to kind of maintain those relationships, or vice versa. If you're friends with non-smokers and you suddenly start smoking,
everybody's doing it.
Yeah, and then like they might not want to hang around with you, or you might have to go outside or whatever, you know.
Right.
So it's just making different choices. Like, that's what bonds us, is similarities most of the time. And so it's important, and I value those friendships so much, and my friends and family are super supportive of me kind of going off and becoming a writer and you know. So I'm very lucky in that regard, but it's also been very important for me to develop connections with people who are trying to do the same thing that I'm doing. So developing a circle of writers, circle of people who travel and live a nomadic life. So one of the ways that people get in their own way is they make things more difficult in their brains than it actually is. So a great example is yesterday, Christine told me about this great snorkeling place. And it was getting late, and I was like, I don't know, I wasn't feeling super great in the morning, and like it's kind of far, and you know, whatever. And we finally decided to go. And it was like super simple. Like you drive, you park right on the beach, and then I had a fantastic time snorkeling, right? And if I had just been like building up those difficulties in my own mind, I never would have gone. And I've done that my whole life. I remember when I was living in Puerto Rico as a kid, the beach was an hour away. And I was like, no, you guys go without me. I'll just stay here in the air conditioning,
right?
And like watch TV or read a book or something. And they're like, no, come. And then we would go, and they couldn't get me out of the water.
It's the best time.
Yeah, and so like, or even, you know, setting up a website. It's like, oh gosh, which hosting place, and you know, which one to do, and there's so many steps, and it's just like, okay, there are 3 steps, right? You gotta make a name, you gotta, you know, and so I feel like if you're dreading doing something, just say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on this, and just figure out like how long it will actually take, right? Because all you're dedicating is 5 minutes, and then you might actually find out like, oh, this whole thing is going to take 10 minutes, you know? Whereas you're thinking, oh, this is like a 5-hour endeavor. So just commit yourself to figuring out how much of an issue or how much of a task, anything that's real that you've been putting off, is actually going to take.
It's so true, because we're so used to being like the big thing that we're trying to figure out. Actually, this podcast is a perfect example. I knew I've always wanted to do this, but it took me forever to start, because I was like, oh, like all the things, right? Like, what's the story behind it, and what platform am I going to put it on, and which equipment am I going to use? And actually, this setup is hilarious. I'm going to take a picture of it and share it. If you're watching this, it is very low budget, because at the end of the day, the point of you want to snorkel because snorkeling is freaking fun. I want to have this podcast so I can share this message to inspire people every day. And if you just focus on that part, and then like the very basic steps that go along with it, it's so much easier to just get started.
Whenever you start something, you're going to be bad at it.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't like that. I don't like being bad at stuff at the beginning, but I'm getting better at it.
Especially as adults. When we're young, we're kids, it's okay to be awful. It's okay to fall on your face. But for some reason, when we become adults, that is so unacceptable. Like the first time you do something, you should be an expert at it yesterday.
Right.
And it's not acceptable to mess up. That's interesting. Actually, so the personality test thing is really interesting to me, because one of the things I find fascinating, especially for people who travel alone, is that they know themselves so little. In other words, it's like, well, what am I going to do when I get there? You're going to do whatever you want.
That's the best.
But, which is my favorite reason. Like, you do whatever you want, whenever you want,
for as long as you want.
When you're solo traveling, I love that. But one of the challenges that people have is they don't know what to do with themselves, because they don't know what they truly love to do on their own. Which is why it's like, don't even go abroad. Just hang out at home by yourself and take yourself out on these dates where you do whatever you want. Are you a badass?
I am. What's funny is, I don't know if you know this or you've noticed, but I don't really swear.
No, I know you don't, because I swear a lot. So by comparison, it's like this.
And it's really just because I grew up with some very conservative people, and as a respect thing, I didn't want to accidentally let something slip out. So it's just kind of a habit. But yeah, I do think I am a badass, but not in the same. I think they come in different flavors, right? Like you're a very different badass than I am, but we all should be a different badass than each other. Yeah. No two badasses are the same. Yeah. Unless you're twins. Well, no, then you're still different badass than your twin, because you and your twin are different people. Okay, so why are you a version of a badass? Because I'm not afraid to go after what I want, and I am adventurous and creative, and I'm growing. Like I'm just growing and following my own path.
Hell yeah. I love the confidence that I hear when you say that.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we are the ones that are in our own way for success. Yeah. And we can't see that. We can't see that because we are in it every single day. And one of the things that I asked Gaby to think about, because we've spent how many days? A few days together now. And we've pretty much kept in touch over the phone and other ways, and we understand each other's goals very deeply. And one of the things I asked you, which is not an easy thing for people to ask because we don't always like criticism and feedback and things like that. I'd asked you, based off of you knowing my goals and what I'm trying to do in life, how am I in my own way and I can't see it? And I actually thought you were going to come back and say something very cruel or mean. I wasn't sure.
That's very on brand for me. No.
No? You'd be very sweet about it, and you would not use any profanity. Actually, will you share your answer?
Yeah, I said that you have so many things that are going on. You're spreading yourself really thin, and that having a clear focus on what you want will get you there faster.
Yeah. And we did this really phenomenal workshop the other morning around goal setting and really actioning it on the spot and breaking it down. So make sure you check the show notes if you're curious about that. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My hat's gonna fall off. Watch.
Oh no!
Oh, I should wear it like this.
Oh yeah, you should like
look.
over
like
one eye. Yeah,
that was like a Michael Jackson look.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how it like instantly transforms from something that's like somewhat good looking to being terrible looking?
No.
That's how I feel about me in shorts.
Shorts? Why?
Oh, I didn't have the confidence for years to wear shorts.
Really?
I have very muscular legs, like to the point where my calves are so large that when I buy boots, I can't fit in normal boots. I have to wear wide boots to get my leg into them.
Oh, interesting.
Or even when I wear compression socks, it's so tight because my calves are so thick that when I peel them off, you can see every single print on my leg. But I didn't have the confidence for years to show my legs because not only am I short, but my legs are really stubby. Oh, here's another one.
Okay.
When I would road cycle, so I used to race a road bike, and people would be cycling behind me. When you're wearing a kit is the matching shirt and short. Yeah. Everybody looks the same gender. It's very hard to tell from behind that you're a male or a female.
Right.
And all the time when I would ride in San Francisco, people would ride up behind me, and it's a common courtesy to say, like, passing on your left or whatever it may be. And people would say, like, good day, young man, or like, great pace, young man, or something like that. Excuse me, young man. I'm not joking. And so forever people would think I was a dude. And one of my favorite things while droning is if I'm wearing like low shorts or something like that. A lot of times from the back, people will think I'm a guy flying a drone. And they'll be like, excuse me, sir.
And then you whip off your hat.
Yes, I throw my hoodie off and I toss my long hair. And I'm like,
I am no man.
How may I help you, officer? I hope you enjoyed this episode of Everyday Badassery. Go find Gaby, aka g.g.mckay. Link in the description below to find her work. And also, don't forget about that free journal. bring out that badassery in you and journal along with this podcast. And we will see you in the next adventure. Go forth, be badass. We'll see you in the next one. Ciao.